Hope you're both well. Lots of love. Bye.
Next question is on the main motion. Mr. Blaney, seconded by Mr. Rickford, move that Bill C-51, an act to enact the Security of Canada Information Sharing Act and the Secure Air Travel Act to amend the Criminal Code, the Canadian Security Intelligence Service Act, and the Immigration and Refugee Protection Act, and to make related and consequential amendments to other acts, be and read the third time and be passed. Qu'est-il à la Chambre d'adopter cette motion? All those in favor will please say yea. Yay! All those opposed will please say nay. My opinion, the yeas have it. All those in favor of the motion will please rise.
Mr. Van Loan.
Mr. Van Loan.
Mr. Fletcher.
Mr. Fletcher.
Ms. Leach.
Ms. Leach.
Mr. Poiliev.
Mr. Poiliev.
Mr. Fantino. Mr. Valcourt.
Mr. Valcourt.
Mr. Blaney.
Mr. Blaney.
Mr. Finley, Haldeman, Norfolk.
Finley, Haldeman, Norfolk.
Mr. Nicholson.
Mr. Nicholson.
Mr. McKay, Central Nova.
McKay, Central Nova.
Mr. Lebel.
Mr. Lebel.
Mr. Clement.
Mr. Clement.
Mr. Paradis.
Mr. Paradis.
Mr. Kenny, Calgary Southeast.
Mr. Kenny, Calgary Southeast.
Mr. Moore, Port Moody, Westwood, Port Coquitlam.
Mr. Moore, Port Moody, Westwood, Port Coquitlam.
Mrs. Aglukat.
Mrs. Aglukat.
Mr. Fast.
Mr. Fast.
Ms. Ambrose.
Ms. Ambrose.
Ms. Raitt.
Ms. Raitt.
Ms. Finley, Delta Richmond East.
Finley, Delta Richmond East.
Mr. Rickford.
Mr. Rickford.
Mr. O'Toole.
Mr. O'Toole.
Mrs. Glover.
Mrs. Glover.
Mr. Benoit.
Mr. Benoit.
Mr. Breitkreitz.
Mr. Breitkreitz.
Mr. Hahn.
Mr. Hahn.
Chong.
Mr. Chong.
Mrs. Trupe.
Mr.
O'Brien.
Voted on,
Mr.
and these are the
Mr.
yeas.
Gold.
Obviously, this is
Mr.
the
Morfundy Royal.
conservative bench as we're
Goodyear.
watching it. Can we just pull up the
Goodyear.
picture here? And you're looking at the bench. Actually, there's John Duncan, who's the conservative whip, who was actually a witness at the Duffy trial today because Duffy went and spoke. So the conservatives are lining up. And now this, we know the result of this bill. So this is one of these, we're showing you your democracy. There's no surprise that the highly controversial anti-terror legislation will pass because the Conservatives support it. That's enough. But the Liberals also support it. But this has nonetheless generated an enormous amount of debate about that line between security and civil liberties and personal freedoms. And the NDP have staked a lot of political capital on opposing this. The Liberals have tried to balance and calibrate a position that they, on kind of the large part, they say this is beneficial, but fundamentally they don't support it. They would change it if they became the government. And the government has used this very critically to say you're either kind of with us or against us on the terror issue. And the Conservatives are now voting as we watch that. Jen, how important politically could this be either for the NDP or the government, the Conservatives in this election, this anti-terror legislation? This really is a proxy for the security debate and what it will mean in this election.
Yeah, I think it's a question of whether or not they can turn this into an election issue. And if they can, then the NDP has staked out some pretty solid ground. whereas I think the the Liberal ground is sort of seen as being a bit self-serving and a little bit cynical in terms of the way it's trying to play to both sides of the fence here. So I think that actually might help the NDP and hurt the Liberals, certainly among the left-leaning constituents, and especially if they can turn this into a major election issue.
All right, the Conservatives continue voting. That was Mark Adler you saw in the corner. He's a Conservative MP in Toronto, and I know that's going to be interesting to watch that seat. Now, this is still the Conservative bench. The Liberals will vote last. They'll vote yes on this, and then the NDP, who have staked a lot of turf on this. Ian, how important is this to the NDP?
Not very. I think that they're solidifying their already existing base of people who have considerable concerns about this. I actually like a good parts of this particular piece of legislation, and I think that what the Liberals have failed to do is articulate which parts of it they really like and which parts they would have taken out, while at the same time still voting in favour of it. The problem that the New Democrats have here is that, simply put, nobody votes on these issues in Canada. This is not, nobody wakes up in the morning and goes, gee, I have an idea, I'm going to vote on this particular issue. Unlike healthcare, the environment, and a whole host of other very, very, very top-of-mind issues for Canadians that they advocate on, national security.
Let me just say, now it's flipped to the Liberals. Ian, I just interrupt you. There's Justin Trudeau standing up, and now the Liberals are supporting this, and I'll get Rob's take on that. But you don't think, Ian, then, so this is consequential then?
Okay, so they're going to pull some, so if you really look at this tactically, they're going to pull some suburban votes in the Mississaugas and the Bramptons away from some of the voters in that particular area who may feel uncomfortable with the sort of interconnection of security agencies a la Mahararar. So if that point can be made, those are the only places, quite frankly, that I see some red votes going orange. Otherwise, it's a wash in all instances, and frankly, the country needs better anti-terrorism legislation, and none of the parties have been able to give it to Canadians. So actually, the one opportunity I do see for Tom Mulcair is to play counter to type and come up with his own anti-terrorism legislation that's even tougher than what the Conservatives are putting forward.
Well, Tom Mulcair just stood up, and the NDP clearly, they spent a lot of political capital on this. You think it's too much. It's interesting. They believe it's a very dangerous bill and a very consequential bill, and it defines them very much against the Liberals on this. And they believe that there's a lot of critics on this, and they've tried to wedge the Liberals in on this. Rob, what's your read on how this is playing out?
Both the Liberals and the NDP in their electoral platforms are going to have a section that's going to say what we will do with Bill 51 and the way we will change it if we form government in the next Parliament. They may differ on some details. Details are obviously important, but for the vast majority of electors, both of them on a going forward basis will change the bill. If Tom Mulcair on day 38 of the writ is talking about Bill C-51, then I'm not sure things are going great for Tom Mulcair. So I agree with Ian. I don't think this is going to be the issue you're going to be hearing him talk about late in the writ. Yeah. Will he have a shot in the middle of the debate against Mr. Trudeau for voting in favour of it to bring some of those vote over? Yeah, I assume that he'll have a shot about this in the debate, but there will not be a lot of election days where this is his message of the day, I guess, but I don't know.
What strikes me, Tim, is that you hear Ian and you hear Rob saying, this is not really this ballot box issue. It's an important issue, but it doesn't have political consequence. The government has made security a very fundamental issue. For the Conservatives, they clearly read this issue very differently.
Well, the bill itself is part of the macro narrative, which is we're the guys who are being tough and terrorists, we're the ones keeping you safe and secure. And it sort of brings us back to the original conversation, which is about Alberta. The PCs in Alberta, arguably, until they brought forward their budget, which wasn't great, didn't have a defining narrative and set of positions around them. Prime Minister will take this, he'll run with this because he's comfortable with it. He knows he's not going to probably win 60% of the population over with it. He's not concerned about that. He's prepared to stand where he is, and that is why they're doing what they're doing. Now, also why they brought some amendments in to demonstrate a degree of flexibility with that 6 or 7% of the population.
That is the classic Conservative red herring strategy. I love it. You make these bills so harsh, so nasty, so draconian, and then you pull back just a little.
Can we get the sound out? This is the NDP. It's not just a vote. They're clapping. This is political statement they're making. Can we listen in here?
Gelato, Mr. Hire, Ms. May, Mr. Pachetti.
You don't always get them clapping. That's a political statement. Let's get the count because we always like to watch history in action.
Gays,
383, 183, nays contre, 96, 96.
I declare the motion carried. The House needs
183 to 97, 183, and that means that third reading is passed for the anti-terror legislation, Bill C-51, and that's the final vote. Now moves on to the Senate, where we don't expect too much trouble in the Senate there, and that issue is, I think, Tim, you said it, although in a much fancier term than I would use when you say macro narrative. I'm sure I don't even know what you
went
meant.
to Albert College. I'm
Right,
surprised.
but basically what you say, the big picture, as we might call it.
Very clear. You should be on VOCM. That's very common man-like.
Anyway, whatever. The TM macro narrative, Tim, on that, which is the security piece, but that was a critical piece, and obviously I think the NDP are going to continue to make that a piece. All right, let me take a short break. Is that the end of the power panel?
No.
See, for me, I could just keep going on with the power panel. Jen Gerson, who's, as you say, Jen's just trying to keep her eyelids open after a very late night there. Thanks so much. What a phenomenal election, Jen. Thanks for your commentary. Always incisive. Great to have you. And you got a big story ahead of you covering it in Alberta. We'll have lots more conversations with Jen, Rob Silver in Toronto, Tim Powers and Ian Capstick holding down the fort here in Ottawa. Great conversation.